Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. And this is where we dig in deeply to those difficult topics of our day that few people want to talk about, even pastors in the church, religious leaders, but we need to talk about them. And so we want to educate ourselves so that we can have conversations with our culture around us, because that's what we're called to do. We're called to have those important conversations with eternal perspectives. Today, I have a returning guest, and we're going to continue our series on King of the Mountain. We're going to be talking again with Chuck Crismire and about his book, King of the Mountain. This is an excellent book. If you are at all interested in end times prophecy, which you should be, because as Chuck's going to tell us today, how it involves politics of what is going on the international scene. So let's hurry up and get him on, because he has a lot to say. There you are.
Well,
welcome
Catherine,
back.
It's good to be back. Thank you. It's a great privilege. You're the hostess with the mostest.
Well, I try. I try. So I'm real excited to get into what we're getting in today, because we're finally getting to the kind of like the nitty gritty, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Who are the major contestants in this battle? We know you started off the series with telling us about the childhood game, you know, who's going to be the king of the mountain, and you wrestle at the top, and who's going to knock the other person down. But this is really happening on the world stage and in the spiritual realm. Anyhow, so you can catch us up, and then we'll talk today about part 3.
For those who are just tuning in, so to speak, and have missed the first 2 segments, you need to understand that indeed this topic actually is probably the best overarching topic and way to understand the direction and trajectory of history, not only since the foundations of the world and the bringing forth of Adam and Eve in the garden, but even before that, with Satan's interchange with God in the Mount of God, he said, I will be like the Most High God. I will ascend to the heights of the north. And so he was declaring that from the very beginning, that his lust for power and his desire to be equal with God would take him and all humankind on a journey. And that journey is what this book talks about. How it has been played out, why it has been played out, and why it's continuing to be played out even at this very moment as we head rather soon toward the second coming of Jesus Christ. All of this has to take place because the Bible makes very clear. In fact, if we go back to the Psalms, in Psalm 2, we find one of the most amazing prophetic passages that seldom is looked to as a prophetic passage. But it says, why do the heathen or the nations rage, and the people imagine a vain and foolish thing? Why is it that the kings of the earth are setting themselves against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let's tear their bands asunder? Well, that's been happening against Israel, against the Jewish people, and it's continuing to happen with the rise of anti-Semitism and the things going on in the Middle East and so on. But that passage goes on to say, God speaking, saying, Yet, no matter the fact that they're rising against me and against my anointed Israel, yet I, God, have set my king on my holy hill or my holy mountain. Now, what is that holy hill or that holy mountain? Well, that holy hill or that holy mountain is the Temple Mount. It's right at the head of Jerusalem. It's the place where God told Abraham in centuries past to take his son of promise, Isaac, and to sacrifice him on Mount Moriah, which now is called the Temple Mount. Later, under the reign of King David, David purchased the Temple Mount from a fellow by the name of Araunah and said, even though Araunah wanted to give it to him, he said, no, I will not take it from you. I will not take that which costs me nothing to serve the Lord. So he bought the Temple Mount. It's been in the hands of Israel, or theoretically owned by Israel, ever since 3,000 years ago. So that was the beginning. Then Jesus, we know, Yeshua, was crucified on that very mountain. The very mountain that God says was his holy hill. And he called and declared in Psalm 2 that his son would rule and reign from that holy mountain. Well, if that be true, and Satan says, no, I'm going to rule and reign from that holy mountain, you know there's a major conflict. This is the conflict of the ages. You can talk about all the spiritual warfare, you can talk about all those kinds of things, but this is the ultimate conflict of the ages. Who is going to rule and reign from the holy mountain that God says is his holy hill? So it's the battle for king of the mountain, the eternal epic and end time battle, and that's what this book is about. It helps us to understand that. I have just basically reduced the first 13, 14 chapters into just a few minutes here. So now what we're going to do, we're going to leap forward now, as you said, and we're going to take a look at the contestants that are involved, because Satan has to use people on the earth.
Yeah.
If you look at Psalm 8, God said that he had given man dominion in the earth. Well, Satan doesn't have dominion in the earth per se, but he's been given dominion in the earth by the treachery or treasonous act of Adam and Eve in the garden, who chose his authority over God's authority. Therefore, Satan, the arch enemy of God and of us, is using humankind to accomplish his purposes, just as God uses humankind to accomplish his purposes. He used David. He said, I'm going to establish my throne upon the throne of David. So Yeshua, Jesus Christ, is going to rule and reign upon the throne of David, to order it and to establish with judgment and justice. But Satan says, no, I'm going to do this. I am going to compete. This is the most incredible competition the world has ever seen. And it's a battle not only for the ages, but it's a battle for eternity. For every human being that's involved in it, for every nation that's involved in it. So who are those nations? Who are those people groups that Satan has seen fit to invest himself in, to one way or the other move humankind toward the possibility and the inevitability, because of prophecy, that he will rule and reign? That is, Satan will rule and reign from the Temple Mount. Some people might say, well, how do you know he would do that? Well, the Apostle Paul said that he will, through an antichrist figure, that is, through a human being that he virtually incarnates himself in to do his will, he will ascend into a rebuilt temple on the Temple Mount and declare himself God. Now, that's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than later.
So,
And we're
Chuck,
seeing all the things set up for that.
yeah, we are. I was going to ask you a little bit about maybe, I don't know why I'm getting a reverberation now that I wasn't getting before on your end. Anyway, you know, when you say Satan uses people,
Right.
Can you tell us what tactics he uses so that people can get a sense of what they're going to be seeing and how this will start to develop.
All right. There's not one number one tactic. He asks, hath God said? Same question he asked in the Garden of Eve. Hath God said? And how you respond to that question determines whether he's going to have dominion in it through you or not. If you say yes and you agree with it, then you have not given dominion. If you say yes, but, or disagree, you have already given him dominion in your life, one way or the other. It's very simple. He has never had to change his tactics. That's his number one tactic. If you disagree with God's authority as God, you necessarily are agreeing in whole and part with his arch enemy's tactic and ways. There's no simple way around it.
Yeah.
So if
It's
God
true.
says something in the Bible, if Jesus says something, and I say yes, but, or I equivocate with it, or I say, yes, but don't you know about this, that this is a modern time, or this is this time, or this is that time, or don't you know what's going on in our culture? God knows it all. He knew it all from the beginning. That's not the point. The point is, do you realize that he's God or not? And if he's not God at all, of all, he ain't God at all.
At all.
You have a compromised God. You're trying to straddle the fence spiritually. And the reality is, Catherine, that it's not even belief in God. The devil believes in God and trembles, the Bible says.
Yes, that's right.
It's whether or not you have embraced Jesus Christ as the only begotten Son of God, full of both grace and truth. And he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. There's no difference between Jesus and the Father. That's why Jesus came. He was sent by the Father to flesh out or give full flesh meaning to the Father and his truth, his love, his mercy, his grace, his long suffering, and all of the things that are characterized of Jesus are characterized of the Father. But if we see Jesus as a different person, if we see him as a different God, as so many do, major ministries in this country block out the entire Old Testament for all practical purposes, say it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
No, it's not irrelevant. It shows the pattern that God wanted to reveal himself to lead up to the revelation of his only begotten Son. And then we have the book of Revelation, which is the apocalypse, the final book of the revelation of Jesus Christ to the world. And if we disagree with any parts of that, regardless of how smart we think we are, regardless of how encultured we are, no matter how much we think that we're so intelligent theologically, and we've been to this seminary or cemetery, whatever it happens to be, it doesn't matter. Because unless we come as a little child, taking God at his word, we can in no wise even see the kingdom of God. And that's what Jesus said.
Yeah.
So that's that's the tactic. Any other tactic is parenthetical to that.
And if I can interject, also in 1 John, I believe John tells us in the letter that there are three main ways that the enemy, the devil, uses people and tricks them into just falling into, I guess, sin and desires. And it's lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and pride.
The pride of life, yeah.
That's right. And so every single time, and those are the three that he tried to use on Jesus in the desert, in the wilderness,
That's
when he first, when he was tested at first. And so he uses those on people, and he usually succeeds. So this is how the Antichrist is going to be put in place. It will be somebody who just lusts after the world, wants power, position, recognition. Right. And so this will rise on the political stage. And that's
it already is.
Yes.
It already is, Catherine.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's
I'm going
there.
to let you continue now. I just want people
No,
to start to see, wow, that person, maybe they're attractive. I think the Bible tells us that he's attractive, or he must be. He's charismatic. He's charismatic enough to bring a lot of people along with him, and they will start to believe him, and they will fall for this. But
right.
if you are reading your Bible and you're focusing on the Word of God, and not compromising, like Chuck was saying, it's not yes, but God said. No, it's yes, that's what God said, and stand firm. So,
Exactly. Well,
okay,
that's how
Chuck,
Jesus responded to the. That's how Jesus responded in the wilderness. There,
yeah.
Satan approached him with those three things. Those three things, and he said, "It is written."
Mm-hmm.
He didn't make up his story. He didn't give excuses. He said, "It is written." That's all he had to say. That's
Mm-hmm.
the authority. So when he spoke before the leaders, before the people of Israel, they said, "You know what? This guy's different. He speaks as one with authority and not as the scribes." We have a lot of pastors out there that speak as the scribes. They don't speak with authority. And the reason is because in one way or the other, so many of them are playing games with the truth.
Yeah.
They're equivocating with what God has said in order to please the people. Now, isn't it interesting? You should bring up the characteristic of this Antichrist figure, because he's the one that Satan invests himself in to accomplish his final purpose to rule and reign from the Temple Mount. Remember, this is King of the Mountain, the eternal epic and end time battle we're talking about in my book. So it comes to this, that this Antichrist figure, as described in the book of Daniel, will gain the kingdom by flattery. Doesn't that sound pretty political? In other words, he's going to tell the people what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That's characteristic of probably 2/3 of our pastors today in America.
Yeah.
In
Sadly.
one way or the other, they won't tell the people the whole truth because they're afraid of offending them. So there's an indirect sense that they become complicit with the spirit of Antichrist because they are not agreeing 100% with Christ. They only pick and choose what they want to agree with that they think will please the people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing that happened in Jesus' day. There were a number of those scribes and Pharisees and so on of the Sanhedrin that actually believed in Jesus. They followed him afar off, so to speak, but they wouldn't come clean before people. They wouldn't make it apparent because they loved the praises of men more than the praises of God.
Yeah.
We have to make a decision in this day and age. Who are we going to please? Who are we going to please? Are we really seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness? Or are we seeking a bunch of accolades from people, seeking to build big churches, seeking to get large offerings, seeking to get our name in the glory, whatever it happens to be, power of perks and position? That seems to be always the thing that diverts us from the kingdom of God. But we've got to focus on these contestants. That's where we're here today, the contestants. And in my book, I'm going to lay these out very quickly, and then we can pick up on any one or all of them as you see fit. The first is the
Okay.
beast of blasphemy. The first is the beast of blasphemy. The next is Muhammad versus the Pope. The next is the eternal city versus the holy city. The next is the bear, that is Russia, versus the Pope. The next is the dragon versus the eagle. That's China versus America. The next is Gog and Magog versus God. And then finally, the Mahdi, or Iranian, the Muslim Messiah versus the Messiah. Now, those are the bigger players as we see right now. We're seeing them being played out, and no one of them is going to be the ultimate agent of Satan. They're all being used. They're all being used and have been over a course of many, many, many years, decades, maybe millennia. But it's all marching or moving toward the inevitable fulfillment of biblical prophecy, where history and prophecy merge or become congruent. And that is what we need to understand. If we don't understand these things, then what happens, Catherine, when we look at history, when we look at our news, we get all confused. And we focus on little bitty parts and pieces of this. For instance, the attack on Iran, or Iran and Hamas's attack on Israel. Those are, what should we say, sideshows in the bigger picture. It's not that they're not important. They're very important, but they're laying the foundation for an even bigger picture. They're leading inevitably toward the fulfillment of this great battle to become king of the mountain. And not one nation, Hamas, Iran, Turkey, Russia, China, NATO. NATO, there's another big player. What is that? That's the resurrected Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
That is the resurrected Roman Empire. And what power did Daniel say, God through Daniel say, was going to be the last great power on earth? Rome.
I guess it was Rome.
It was Rome. Now, Rome was in existence and in power when Jesus came on the planet. And Rome is now in existence in its totality on the near edge of the second coming, with the attack of Russia on Ukraine, forcing the issues concerning nations that would or would not be part of NATO, and now nations that up till that point refused to be part of NATO are now part of NATO. And the entirety of the former Roman Empire, from the south all the way to the farthest extremes of the north, has now become a resurrected Roman Empire called NATO.
I just want to, can you just, I know that we have a lot to cover, but there are a lot of people out there that still don't understand this whole thing with Russia and Ukraine has to do with NATO being right on the edge of Russia, and they don't want that.
Well, Russia doesn't want that, and we understand that.
Yes.
I mean, we didn't like the fact when Khrushchev put nuclear facilities on Cuba, right 90 miles off of our shores back in the early 1960s. We didn't like that. It was too close for comfort. So we understand that. In fact, Russia warned about that. Mm-hmm. From 2014, Russia warned this country and NATO, don't do this.
Yeah.
But we insisted upon doing it. It was those who wanted, they had a philosophy of war and government that they were intent on accomplishing that purpose. And so they proceeded to move inexorably toward trying to make Ukraine a part of NATO, which would cause the encroachment even the more so against Russia's boundary. And Vladimir Putin had basically said increasingly, I got a red line here. We're not going to put up with this. Mm-hmm. Now, you can say, well, you know, Russia's so terrible and Russia's this, that, or the other. We're not into talking about that, even though Vladimir Putin thinks and has declared that Russia now is the moral model of the world, that the U.S. has long since abandoned that and is one of the most wicked places in the world, but Russia has now gained the upper hand morally. That's Vladimir Putin believes that. And he has reasons for believing it, whether or not we agree with it. That's his viewpoint. Right. And viewpoint determines destiny. On my national radio program, every day I say viewpoint determines destiny. There are no neutral viewpoints. Every viewpoint is determining destiny, no matter how sacrosanct you think your viewpoint is. It is a place in destiny. So Ukraine comes along and tries to follow up with what has been offered to them to, you know, you're the great democracy, you're the great this, and we're going to encourage you to fight off the resurrected Bolsheviks there in Russia, Vladimir Putin and his kilt and so we're going to help you. Russia says, not so fast. We have a sovereign nation. And we're not going to put up with that. We drew a red line a long time ago, and you didn't heed it, and now we're going to do something about it. Now, Ukraine has increasingly shown itself to not be that wonderful democratic country that we all thought it was.
They tried.
In fact, They have gone against and shut down a whole realm of churches in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So the battles are very different than what is presented in the news media or by your favorite politician. It's far more nuanced than that. Far more nuanced than that. And
So
for
thank you
whatever
for,
it's worth,
yeah.
Kev, go ahead. For whatever it's worth,
No,
for the
yeah.
past 15 years, I have been asked to speak to one of the largest Ukrainian Russian churches in the country in Massachusetts every year. Why? Because they listen to my radio program up there in liberal country and they say, this is the message that we've been needing to hear.
Yes.
This is the message we want our young people to hear because they're being absorbed into an Americanized, hyper liberal, anti God culture, and it scares them to death.
It should.
They believe that my voice as a former lawyer is more listenable to them than all the other pastors around because we're not trying to pander. We're not trying to please. We're trying to see things from God's viewpoint, not from man's geopolitical viewpoints, however nationalistic that might be.
So thank you for explaining that.
Well, I hope it
I
helps.
want people to understand what's going on in Ukraine and why there's this. It's almost as if you can imagine a chessboard where there's many different levels and there's constant movement and everyone's trying to position themselves. But eventually it is going to come down, and we're close. We're really close.
Well, we're told, that there's going to be some sort of resolution there. We're also told that there's going to be some sort of resolution with Iran. We're also told there's going to be some sort of resolution with Congo, with this, that, or the other. All of these various peace efforts are out there right now, and they're multiplying like rabbits. Exactly how it's all going to come out, we don't know. Mm-hmm. But what we do know, Catherine, is that every single one of these things is moving inexorably to the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and the pieces are come together. My wife loves to do puzzles. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, she just loves to do puzzles. And, they're jigsaw puzzles. Well, what's happening in our world is like a jigsaw puzzle. And people try to figure it out by looking at one piece. And they think they can figure out all of Bible prophecy by one piece. Oh, this is that. No, this is not that. It's one piece of that, which is the bigger picture. And that's what this book is about, to help us see so many of the pieces so that we can come together and see them collectively from God's viewpoint. And when we do that, it makes it easier for us to understand what's going on out there. We're not going to get nearly as fretful over what's going on because we're going to see that there is a trajectory and it's laid out in the Bible, not actually piece by piece, but if we really understand and want to understand, this book actually lays it out in a way. Well, let me put it this way. A number of years ago, a Jewish talk show host, he wasn't a Christian believer. He brought me on to talk about this book. And he said, well, we got an hour. Well, halfway through the hour, in a break, he said, Chuck, there's no way we can even scratch the surface of this book. Will you come on next week? So next week, he did the same thing. And about halfway through, he said, wow, we're just barely making, there's so much here.
There is.
Will you come on next week? Guess what? That happened for 7 weeks in a row. Unprecedented. I mean, you got me on for 4 weeks. He had me on for 7 weeks in a row. Why? Why would a Jewish talk show host do that? Because there was something gripping about this book. Mm-hmm. He saw something very different than anything he had been exposed to or understood in his reading of the Torah, of the Tanakh, listening to the rabbis, and so on. The whole thing began to come clear. And that's what the book is about. So I don't know if you have another question here, but I can just roll into a few of these contestants and say why they're contestants.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. The first is, we know of a beast of blasphemy. That beast of blasphemy is the Antichrist. We know that ultimately he represents the beast empire, the final beast empire. So that final beast empire is going to essentially be ruled over and reigned by the counterfeit Christ figure, the Antichrist and his false prophet. And the book of Revelation tells us in chapter 13 and 14 that as a result of that movement, eventually he will mandate that every man, woman, and child bear a mark that represents their allegiance, their pledge of allegiance to that beast government, the final world empire that Satan himself is seeking to impress upon the world to trust him through that government. It's about trust. God's whole issue is about trust, and Satan's whole issue is about trust. So the Antichrist is going to present himself in a nice, friendly, trustworthy way.
Yes.
Pandering to the people, telling them what to want. And it says also that by the pursuit of peace, he will destroy many. People love peace, but peace at what price? Peace to accomplish what? So he's in competition with the Prince of Peace, Christ himself. You see how this works? So the beast of blasphemy is that beast empire led by the counterfeit Christ figure, who ultimately will be Satan's final representative to rule and reign from the Temple Mount. But in order to get to that point, there are a whole lot of other players that are involved on the world scene. One of those is Muhammad versus the Pope. Now, Muhammad came around in what? The late 500 AD, 600 AD, and came around and basically said, this is the new religion. This is the voice of Muhammad and Gabriel telling us exactly what's going to be in the end times. And Jesus isn't your final guy. It's going to be Isa, and Isa is going to be the Jesus of Mohammedanism. And then there's going to come a Mahdi, the 12th Imam, and he is going to be the ultimate Messiah. He's going to be the one that's going to rule the world and bring the whole world under submission to Islam. The word Islam means submission. Totally contrary to the whole concept of submission in the Bible. Mm-hmm. The Bible is a voluntary submission. Muhammad is a mandatory submission. Right. You either submit or you get hit with a horrific tax from which you will never rise again, or you will lose your life at the point of the sword, one way or the other.
It's called the Jesus tax.
It's called the Jesus tax.
And they say that actually the Mahdi, the Messiah of Islam, will be the true Messiah, and Jesus will be coming back again to say so. That's what they say.
And
okay.
Yes, and he will be coming back to kill the Christians and the Jews.
And for those who think, for those who have said and believe that Islam is a peaceful religion, like George W. Bush said after 9/11, they're absolutely wrong. And here's why they get that impression. Because when Muhammad was in Mecca, he was peaceful. He thought that he could gain dominion over the Christians and the Jews peacefully, but they didn't submit. So when he went to Medina, he changed his tune radically. So he had surahs or writings there in Mecca that sound peaceful. But then it all changed when he went to Medina. And all of the things that he stated in Medina are deemed to supersede everything he said in Mecca. Therefore, he completely eradicated the whole idea of peaceful submission and so on and said, no, you got to round them up, find them behind every tree, wherever you can find the Jew and the Gentile. These are the rebels. These are the people. They're the enemy, and you got to get rid of them. Get rid of all of them. That's the goal. So that's Islam in its pure form. Then we have eternal city versus the holy city. Well, what is the eternal city? Well, the eternal city is known as Rome. Rome is deemed to be the centerpiece city of the world, not New York, not London, but Rome. Where do all the nations and their leaders go when a pope dies? They flood to be seen in Rome. So Rome is where their heart is. And Rome is the centerpiece. It was Rome that was in power when Jesus was on the planet the first time, and that ultimately put the nails in his flesh at the urgence of the Jewish leaders. And it will be Rome that is in place again when Jesus returns. Well, what is this Rome? This Rome is not a quasi-religious Rome. It is a country known as the Vatican that sits in a place called Rome and incorporates or merges together all of the details and practices of the ancient Roman Empire through the emperor himself. Therefore, in about 500 AD, a transition was made that the title of the Emperor of Rome that merged religion and civil authority together would be transferred to the Bishop of Rome, i.e., the Pope. Therefore, he is called the Pontifex Maximus, the maximum pontiff who weds church and state to govern the world. The Pope is deemed to rule the world in their own literature. And if that were not enough, they also have declared they do not intend to rule the world from the Vatican, but from the Temple Mount. So much more that we could talk about concerning that's in the book. And it's all documented with articles. Yes, even there in Israel, King of the Mountain. By the way, I need to make this clear, because people are commonly go and they're going to run to Amazon to get the book. Can't find it there. The book is no longer on Amazon. The only place you can get this book now is through our website, saveus.org. Saveus.org. There you can find the book, and we make it available to you for $15. It's not a $15 book, but we make it available to you for $15, much less than its value. But you won't be disappointed. I want to sell the book. It's a message, friends. It's not about selling books. I'm not about selling books. I'm about writing messages, and don't receive any income from it myself. God is seeking to woo and to warn the nations, but particularly professing Christians. It's due process. That's what God is doing. It's due process, so that we're not going to take it unawares. And when you see these things take place, when you see the dragon, China, and facing off with the U.S., it's all part of the bigger panoply of God's purpose. It really is. When you see Russia squaring off with the Pope, did you know that there was a tremendous antipathy between the Pope, John Paul II, and Russia? He considered Russia to be the most dangerous person to the papacy. Not to Christ, but to the papacy. And if you were to read about this in the 700 some page book called The Keys of This Blood by Malachi Martin, who was a Vatican insider, it would give you a whole lot of insight as to the real things geopolitically and spiritually going on in our world and how they've been happening. And it's all in this book, King of the Mountain. Then, of course, you've got Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog versus God. Well, what is Gog and Magog? Go to Ezekiel 38 and 39. God is going to raise up Gog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and he's going to gather together in a secret confederation in the latter days of the end times. We're in the latter days of the end times, by the way. The end times began on the day of Pentecost. Peter said so. And we're in the latter days of the end times. We haven't yet gotten to the day of the Lord. That's the final little small piece of the puzzle. But right now we're in the latter days of the end times. Exactly where we are those latter days, I cannot tell you exactly, but we can look at the season. We can look at what's developing. That's
Right.
how we understand the time we're in.
We're very close. Very close. Even the technology for the mark of the beast. Yeah.
You know, the Lord called me to lead the practice of law at the height of my career in 1992. He said, son, you've been pleading the cause of men long enough. I want you to plead my cause in the land as a voice to the church, declaring vision for the nation, America's greatest crisis hour, here on the near edge of the second coming. Been doing that for 32 years now without an income from any man's money. You say, how's that possible? Ask God.
Mm-hmm.
Ask God. Because if I were to rely upon other people's money to tell me what to say or do, I wouldn't be able to say what I say. I wouldn't be able to speak the truth because I would have to pander like so many others to please the people. It's not about that. It's about delivering a message, sort of like Jeremiah, to the people. Stand at the gate of the Lord's house. Stand at the gate of the city. Get the message out. Whatever you have to do, get the message out so that the people cannot say, I did not know.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing what we're doing. Isn't that why we're doing what we're doing, Catherine?
That's why I do what I do. And it's sometimes it's thankless.
Well, just think what it was like for Jeremiah. God said to Jeremiah, you know what he said? He said, look, I've called you to do this. Jeremiah said, no, I'm just a child. He said, don't say that. No, and you're going to speak with my words, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they're most rebellious. In fact, you're going to speak with my words. Don't be afraid of their faces.
Yeah.
They're going to come after you. You know, he said exactly the same thing to Ezekiel in chapter 2 and 3, or 3 and 4. Yeah. Exactly the same thing. It's a stubborn and rebellious people. He's talking about his own people.
Yeah.
They won't listen. But I'm going to do everything I can to get the message out so that they cannot say they didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? This may sound, this is serious. It's sobering. There's no question about it. It's serious and sobering. But you know what? I have a happy heart. I really do. I'm a joyful person. The joy of the Lord is my strength. I know that he's in charge. I'm doing what is very fulfilling. I'm just hoping that nobody's going to put me down in a dungeon like they did with Jeremiah.
That's right.
But they did. I hope they're not going to put me in the middle of a log and saw me in half like they did to Isaiah. You know, but still there are ways to be rejected. You're tacitly rejected. Oh, I didn't want to hear that. Don't tell me that. I didn't want to hear that. Well, you need to hear. God isn't concerned about what you want to hear. He says, change your want tos. That's what I told my grandkids growing up. They said, but I don't want to go out there and mow the lawn. I don't want to go out there. I said, well, then change your want tos.
Change.
And guess what? They did. They learned to change their want tos.
Well, and you know, what we go through today, it's more like canceling or psychological harassment by family members. You know, it's something. You get ostracized by people who become uncomfortable with the message because they're not used to hearing truth. They're used to hearing the pablum that's served up every Sunday
Right.
in their local church. And it's just one of those things, but that is small in comparison. Like you just mentioned, what happened to the prophets that God had out there in the Old Testament that we read about. And we saw what happened to every single disciple of Jesus. You know, the history says that they all were executed in one way or another, except for John. They tried to kill him, but he survived. And we all know what happened
Yeah,
to
they
Jesus.
banished him away from here, guy.
Yeah. So this is a wicked world, and people need to realize that and just focus on Jesus. And it's, I keep singing a song in my head the last several days that, our mind should just be on Jesus. And when we focus on him and the things God is doing, not only will we be amazed, we'll have joy in our heart because we have joy of the Lord, but everything else kind of fades away in the background. And it's like, okay, I see this happening and I need to warn people because I've been appointed as a watchman, just like you.
Right.
And that's why
Yeah,
we do what we do.
you can't put your hand over your eyes and say, "Look, God, you can't see me," or like a 2-year-old to the people and say, "Well, you can't see me. I know these things are going on, but I'm not going to talk to you about it. I don't want you to be upset." Let me tell you a story. About 15 years ago, I was asked to speak to a group of men on a Saturday morning in a church that belonged to the second largest denomination in this country. And I was given a half an hour, so I said, "Okay, Lord, what do I talk about?" And he said, "Talk about the then time church, the now time church, and the end time church." That divides up very nicely, 10 minutes apiece. So I began to talk, and after 10 minutes, these men, purported Christians, began to hackle me, catcalls. I mean, it was overt. And I was shocked. I never had experienced anything like that. I've spoken across the country and never experienced anything like that. And as I continued, the catcalls increased. And it was extremely discomforting for me. I mean, why am I even here? So finally, I finished off as best I could by faith, pressing toward the mark for the calling of God in Christ Jesus. And at the end, not one person came up to me, except one, the pastor. I didn't know he was there. And here's what happened. He said, "Mr. Crismire, you may wonder why the men responded the way they did." He said, "It's because we don't talk to people about the end times here in this church. We don't want people to be afraid. We just want them to love Jesus." In other words, that pastor was serving as a censorship for his entire congregation, including the men, that would prevent them as men from being the voice of the Lord to their families and their children, to prepare them in the way of the Lord. So he was absolutely preventing them from fulfilling what God said was his next to last end time message in Malachi chapter 3 or 4, that before the great and terrible day of the Lord, I will send forth the spirit of Elijah the prophet to call the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I strike the earth with a curse. That pastor did not want his men to carry that out. He would do everything he could to make everybody just feel good and play spiritual patty cake until the whole world came apart. And then they would wonder, was this a pastor that led me as a Pied Piper to the edge of the spiritual cliff? That's where we are, Catherine.
Yeah, I know.
I could take a half an hour and tell you story after story after story that I've experienced across this country, sort of like that. These are sobering times.
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of churches that won't talk about the end times. They won't talk about how we need to be aware and what did Jesus mean by it would be like in the days of Noah, or what is politically going on today. You know,
Yeah.
what should we be looking for? They subvert all of that. And just from what you said, you know, just like that, we just want people to love Jesus. And
It's a false
yeah,
peace. It's a peace at any price. And Jesus made a statement that very few people will ever teach or preach about. He said, "Don't think that I came to bring peace, but a sword.
yeah.
Do not think that I came to bring peace, but a sword." Now, he
Mm-hmm.
was the Prince of Peace incarnate from God's
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint, but he knew that his message, his person on the planet, was for the purpose of bringing the sword of God that would divide the people. He said it will divide husbands and wives, it will divide families, it will divide close friends, because they will have to choose. So Jeremiah, not Jeremiah, but Joshua, there in the Old Testament, chapter 24, made this wonderful statement that you see on plaques all over. Choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord
Mm-hmm.
according to his viewpoint, not mine.
Yeah.
That's it. So who's the king of the mountain? Next time when we get back, we're going to refine this and bring it down to home in ways that perhaps a lot of people wouldn't think about. What is this Temple Mount anyway?
Yeah.
Is it that thing over there in Israel? Well, yes, but is that all it is? No, not from God's viewpoint. Wait till our next conversation.
I'm
You can
excited.
get ready.
Yeah. It's always good, Chuck. It's always good. So where can people find these books? And also to go listen to you on your daily, what is it, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern
Right.
Viewpoint program. Where can they
That's
listen
correct.
and
Well,
where
they
can
can
they find your
listen.
books?
Okay. Thank you. They can listen locally in the broader Richmond, Virginia area on two radio stations here, AM 590 and FM 97.7 from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. The majority of our listeners listen in various stations all over the country, even out from the midst of the San Francisco Bay and on the border of Alcatraz. Our
Wow.
program emanates out of the San Francisco Bay and is heard at 4 a.m. every morning there.
Wow.
Over all of San Francisco. We have listeners that set their clock to listen to Viewpoint at 4 a.m. in California
Golly dang.
from the center of San Francisco Bay. People listen on their cell phones, podcasts. That's the big thing. You can listen any time of the day or night. We're on every podcast site. You can go to our website, saveus.org, saveus.org. You can connect in with the satellite agency there, oneplace.com. We're on the Charisma Podcast Network. We're available even on the shores, on the slopes of, believe it or not, Mount Everest. Have listeners, at least one listener on the slopes of Mount Everest in Kathmandu to Viewpoint. It's a universal message. It's a
Yes.
universal message. And
Yes.
the book, right there on our website, saveus.org. $15 will put the book in your hands. You can't find a better deal anywhere. This book today would be probably $25.
Yep.
$15. Call us 1-800-SAVE-USA. That's 1-800-SAVE-USA, or write to us at Save America Ministries. P.O. Box 70879, Richmond, Virginia, 23255. And then you add $6 for postage and handling. I don't know if you noticed it, but postage rates are going up again this month.
Oh, again? Oh my goodness.
Congratulations.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you again. I'm very excited for our fourth segment. I can see why the gentleman with the program needed you to come back 7 times. It's so in depth. And I know everyone, we are just skimming the surface. This doesn't even begin to cover what you will learn from the book and listening to Chuck's radio program. It really began to form the way I saw things around me happening, connected the dots politically and what I was already reading in my daily readings in the Bible. So, and that was years ago. Chuck, I can't believe how long
we
I've been
became sort of
listening
like a
to
little
you.
team then, huh?
Yeah. I think I was listening to you back in like 2003, 2004.
Oh,
And it was giving me so much knowledge. And I would sit and carpool waiting for my children to get out of school. And that's what I was
there's a good
listening
place to
to.
listen. You
Yeah.
know that in up in the Northeast, I've actually had families that raise their children listening to my program in the afternoons.
It's a great education, because you talk about so many things happening today, and it brings things into perspective. We don't have to listen to the propaganda media. We can get our understanding, and then you point out different articles from around the world where people can go look up themselves and start pulling those from different media all over the place.
Yeah.
And which is a good education. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate it. Blessings to those who view and listen, and
Yes.
may his kingdom come, may his will be done.
Yes. God bless you. Thank you. And we'll get you back on in a few weeks. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.